Joel didn't sleep. I could tell by the way he was sitting when I came out of the back room at first light, the same position he'd been in when I'd gone to rest. Chair facing the door, pack on the floor within reach, hands loose in his lap. Not the collapsed stillness of finally unconscious exhaustion, but the controlled stillness of someone who had decided that rest was a risk they weren't taking. He looked at me when I came in. "We need to talk," he said. Ellie was awake too, sitting cross-legged on the couch with her journal open across her knees. She looked up when I came in, and there was something in her expression, a tension held carefully behind her eyes, like a word she'd decided not to say yet. I sat down across from Joel. He took a breath, looked at his hands, then directly at me. "I've been in 3 quarantine zones," he said. "Different cities, different origins. In all of them, the same fundamental rule applied without exception." He paused. "The infected respond to proximity. They respond to sound, heat, movement. In high saturation zones, like this one, a person moving through open territory at ground level lasts, at best, a few hours without an encounter that ends badly." He stopped again. "You have been moving through this city for 8 days. I know. I need you to understand what I'm saying, Ethan. 8 days in a zone this far gone is not luck. It is not good technique or good cover or good timing." His voice stayed flat. "It is something else, and I need to understand what that something else is before I trust the safety of this group to it." I looked at him and thought about all the answers that weren't answers. "I don't know what I am," I said. "I'm telling you that honestly. That's not good enough." Ellie looked up from her journal. "Joel." "No." He kept his eyes on me. "It's not good enough because whatever is different about him, the infected know it. They've been tracking him, following his route, storing his movements somewhere in whatever they use for memory now." His jaw tightened slightly. "And I don't know if that makes him an asset or a liability. And until I do, I am not moving through open territory next to someone that every infected in a 4-block radius is paying attention to." The apartment was very quiet. "Then test me," I said. He looked at me steadily. "I intend to." We went outside at 8 in the morning. Joel's plan was direct. He outlined it at the kitchen table with the bluntness of someone who'd run field operations before and didn't see the value in dressing hard choices up in careful language. We would move into the open. Not deep, just far enough to be visible from distance. We would stand, we would wait, and we would observe how the infected responded to each of us. "If they come for you the same way they come for us," he said, "then we're in trouble and we run and we figure out a different problem. If they don't," he stopped. "If they don't, then we know something real, and we work with what we know." Ellie had her knife on her belt. Joel had something larger that I didn't examine too closely. I had the folding knife and the same pair of boots that had carried me through 8 days of this city and hadn't let me down yet. We stepped out into the fog. 9th Street was empty in both directions. The fog was heavy, the low, cold kind that erases the middle distance and makes everything beyond 30 feet feel theoretical. Our breath came out in visible clouds. The only sound was the slow creak of a shop sign somewhere above us, moving in a wind I couldn't feel at street level. We stood at the intersection, waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Joel stood slightly behind and to my left. Ellie was to my right, close enough that I could hear her breathing. Neither of them moved. The discipline of people who understood that staying still was its own form of action. 2 minutes. Then from the north, the pressure change. That shift in the air I'd cataloged so many times now that my body registered it before my mind did. The weight of something large, moving somewhere in the fog. Ellie's hand moved to her knife. Joel didn't move at all. From the gray at the end of the block, a shape emerged, single, moving straight down the center of the street toward us. My chest tightened. Everything in me that was still functioning on basic biological instinct read the approach and fired every available alarm simultaneously. But I stood still. I kept my breathing even. I kept my hands loose at my sides. The shape slowed as it came closer. At 20 feet, it stopped. It was the closest I had been to one of them in full light since this had started. close enough to see the outline clearly, the proportions that were almost right, almost familiar, and weren't. The wrongness of it from this range was different than from a window or through fog, more specific, more impossible to dismiss with distance or narrative. It stood in the middle of 9th Street and looked at me. Not at Joel, not at Ellie, at me. I heard Joel exhale very quietly behind me. Not from fear, from the recognition of something confirmed. From the east, the cross street, 2 more shapes appeared, moving toward the intersection. They slowed as they reached it, arranging themselves with the same precise, unhurried geometry I'd seen from the roof on day 7. They were not approaching, they were positioning. The first one, still 20 feet ahead, tilted its head slightly. A gesture so ordinary, so human, that it landed like a cold hand on the back of my neck. "Don't move," Joel said quietly. "Either of you." I stood. The creature in front of me took 1 step forward, then stopped. Another step. Stopped. Not charging, not rushing. Neither of the flanking shapes were moving either. They were holding their positions, evenly spaced on either side, watching. The one in front of me was close enough now that I could have reached out and touched it. It stopped. What happened next? I am writing slowly because I need to get it right. My right hand, I don't know why, some impulse I couldn't name and didn't consciously authorize, lifted slightly from my side. Not dramatically, not reaching. Just a partial raise, the way you'd lift your hand before deciding whether to wave at someone. The creature moved, not toward me, not backward. It shifted, a full-body rotation, subtle, smooth, so that it was angled slightly to one side, like it was making room, like it was adjusting, responding to the direction of my raised hand the way water responds to a current. I lowered my hand, it shifted back. The 2 flanking shapes hadn't moved. I heard Ellie make a sound behind me, not a scream. A compressed, involuntary sound of something being processed faster than the body could contain it. And Joel's voice, very low, very controlled, with something in it I hadn't heard from him before. "Back up slowly," he said. "Both of you. Back to the building." We moved. The 3 shapes stayed where they were. They did not follow, did not advance. As we retreated, they remained fixed in their positions, watching, holding the geometry of the moment with the same patient, deliberate precision that I was beginning to recognize as their most frightening quality. The fog closed behind us. Back inside, Joel shut the door and stood with both hands against it, like he needed the physical resistance of it. Ellie was writing in her journal, fast and close, filling a page with observations the way you capture something before it fades. I sat at the table with my notebook open. I wrote the same thing 3 times before I believed it enough to leave it on the page. They're not hunting me. They're not ignoring me. They're waiting. I sat back and looked at what I'd written. Joel turned from the door and looked at me across the apartment. His expression had crossed over from suspicion into something more complicated, the face of a person holding 2 equally unwelcome possibilities and not having the information yet to choose between them. "What are they waiting for?" Ellie asked quietly from the couch. Neither Joel nor I answered, because the only answer that fit the evidence was the one that neither of us was ready to say yet. They were waiting for me to understand what I was, and I was starting to be afraid that understanding it would be the end of the only safety I had left. Day 10. Joel asked me one question before we turned out the light. "Have you had any dreams since the city went dark?" I told him I hadn't slept long enough to dream. He looked at me for a moment. "You should know," he said, "that in the last zone, the one before this, the person the infected followed wasn't dangerous to them." He paused. "They were dangerous to us."